So anyway, thanks to you, after last week's podcast, I had Alexei Sayle round my house shouting through my letterbox, "Hey, what do you think I mean? I'm not funny. Who said that? I'm not funny. Hello, John, got a new motor? Hello, John, got a new motor?"
Well, I did mean to pick you up on it. For people who didn't hear last week's Comedy Slab, A, it is available, and B, you said without any sort of hesitation and no sort of brooking no argument, I think is the phrase, which I've never fully understood, but I never watched Brookside anyway. But you said Alexei Sayle isn't funny, as if that was, on tablets of stone that everyone would agree with. And I thought, even I don't agree with that. I didn't like him when he started out. But I have to say, grudging respect for him enjoying his most recent radio series.
So you've done it twice now, so he'll be round again next week, won't he? Thanks very much. Hello and welcome to the Comedy Slab. I'm Shane O'Connor. He's Adrian Lacey. You caught us in a candid moment there, just chatting about somewhat disjointed relationship with Alexei Sayle and how he comes round and regularly shouts through my letterbox. I'll be honest with you, I like the company really, so I don't really want him to stop doing it. If you've never heard the pod... Sorry.
Oh, no, you finish your thought and then come back to me about a tweet related to Mr. Sayle.
Oh, okay. If you've never heard the podcast before, it's two geezers, that's me and him. We get together every week and one of us will choose a comedy programme for us to watch. We'll have gone away and done our homework, watched the programme at least a couple of times. You've done it more than 2 times.
I have, yeah, because sometimes I've gone back to a show I've watched, for the first time, and then I've come back to it, and it's been some weeks later. I thought, well, I've got to re-slab, really. So I've done another 2, making, obviously, a grand total of 3.
Don't think I ever have. I think 2 is my limit. After 2, I'm just worn out. I couldn't manage another time.
Sounds like you're just Mr. Contractual Obligation, but I'm very disappointed. I thought you were Mr. Passion.
I'm under the doctor for it anyway. So
I bet you are. She's very pleased.
I always love that phrase. I'm under the. You never say anything else like that, do you? I'm under the plumber. I'm under the plumber for my.
I'm under the weather. I often say
for my U-bend. Yeah, I'm under the sideboard. I'll come out in a minute. Anyway, so we listen to a comedy program. Could be a TV show, could be a radio show, could be some kind of internet related. We have podcasts and comedy programs and stuff that's online. We will get together and let you know what we thought and let each other know what we thought, argue about it, have a falling out, probably about 10 minutes before the end, kiss and make up, and then do it all again the following week. That's roughly how it goes, isn't it? We'll hear 3 clips from the comedy show in question, and we'll also give it each a mark out of 5, giving it a grand total out of 10. Your thoughts, sir?
That tweet rolling back, rewinding to Alexei Sayle. I'm not a Twitter frequenter. I prefer less is more and quality rather than quantity, which is not very fashionable in the 21st century. But anyway,
which is why he won't do a selfie. He actually does an oil painting. That's what he.
Although, funnily enough, people say I'm no oil painting, so it's as long as it's broad. It's actually a square painting. But anyway, or I'm an old square. Did you see that tweet, what I twittered and tagged you in?
Yes.
Did you at least like that? I should explain. It doesn't feature Alexei Sayle, but it features Leslie Crowther, who was the person who'd retweeted it as a comedy writer. Is it Joel Morris, I think, retweeted that. He said, no one under 40 is going to get this. If you find yourself saying after me, Crackerjack, then you're the right age or you've done enough Googling. But you have to admit, Leslie Crowther with a shaved head in tight suit with trousers too short, just like Alexei Sayle, talking about communism. Come on, get in.
And the idea was that there was a technical fault, wasn't it? So they could only continue. Yeah. They could only continue in Leslie Crowther.
Leslie Crowther only. Having been a continuity announcer, I get a bit tired of people impersonating us, but we're fair cop, really. We're a soft target. And Angus Deaton, wasn't it, doing the voice as the announcer?
Yeah, he would have been, wouldn't he, at that time? And before he became persona non grata, didn't he? With the
yes.
Well, thanks to Ian Hislop and the other fella,
Mr. Merton.
Yeah, Paul Merton, who just wouldn't let it go and kind of finished his career, didn't they, really? Quite
Well, he did
effectively.
come back. He did. He's back on the beat. He's persona grata again, I think, although
is
he's
he?
not particularly high profile, but that may be his choice.
What do you know? What I don't get
Yeah.
is how somebody like that, has their career ruined, and then somebody like Richard Bacon can be on the Peruvian marching powder, and it seemed he like just comes back and just he gets sacked from Blue Peter and then goes on to work on Five Live, and it doesn't seem doesn't seem to affect them.
Well, it's the randomness of showbiz, but also it was. I mean, you couldn't have planned it better. Not that I would condone said powder, but if you had to make a transition from being kids presenter, and if you could plan it, which I don't think he did for a moment, that's the way of suddenly being seen as edgy and grown up. And he used to be. People used to say "aha" to him because he came across as an Alan Partridge type figure.
Yeah, he still does, doesn't he? No, well, he does to me. He does in my mind. So that's all over I hear is aha. So are you saying that like future children? So if I'm watching.
No, don't even go there.
If I'm watching a children's TV presenter now,
I'm going to slap an e-certificate on your face.
They're going to be found in some kind of crack den in the future, and then go on to present news night. Is that
right? You can put the e-certificate on. Well, Valerie Singleton, I'm not associating her with any substance abuse, but she did go on to Nationwide and be seen as a serious journalist. She did a very good transition from Blue Peter to grown-upness. And do you remember her on the Money programme?
In fairness, though, I mean, Blue Peter at the time was more respectable than most adult programmes, wasn't it? I mean, it was.
But my dad didn't respect it. He thought they talked down to us as kids.
Oh, okay.
Mind you, he was never home early enough to see it.
In our house, it was like they'd rush in and turn off Magpie and say, "They watch Blue Peter."
We're a BBC household. We will not have ITV in here.
Don't hang about with those chavs.
Chat TV, or as our friend Stuart Lee calls it, the failed state of TV. I do love that line.
Anyway, my choice last week to choose a comedy programme for us to throw on the slab, as we very often say. If you've not got the is it a metaphor? I never.
I think it's a semaphore. It's
it's
like
half a metaphor, is it?
Semaphore, yeah.
It's actually, to repeat, it's a heard before.
Very good.
So the whole kind of metaphor is that we put them on the slab and we dissect and we pick apart, and it's like a kind of what would you say? An autopsy critique, I suppose, is the way that we.
That sounds like a show on one of those lower order channels at the bottom of the EPG.
4, that is. It's got Channel 4 written all over it, isn't it? That.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I've been watching too much Quincy. I think that's my trouble, along with doing this podcast. But I chose a radio show from the end of last week. So if you didn't hear it, we always choose at the end. Last week's show, I chose Count Arthur Strong's radio show, a fictional character. How could he not be? Created by Steve Delaney. He's essentially I never know whether he's retired or semi-retired variety star. He's certainly, if you believe his repartee, that he was once somebody in show business. And a lot of his references are of people who are no longer in showbiz, or even in some cases no longer alive. And
just thinking, this is sounding like your CV, Shane.
It does sound, only his is
or is it mine?
His is a bit better, actually. Maybe I should lie more. And that's essentially it. I mean, this was about his. It's just following him, isn't it? Really. I mean, there is no more to it than that, I guess.
No. We will get to that, but yes, you're not allowed my headline review until we hear the first audio clip.
That is the sit of the con, though, isn't it, as they say in the trade, really?
Yes.
Interestingly, the only thing that Steve Delaney has done, and he's done a lot of this, which we'll touch on a little bit later. Before we go to the first clip, though, I wanted to just mention something that I forgot to mention in last week's Comedy Slab. I don't think I did anyway. We did Upstart Crow last week, which was the Ben Elton thing. And I forgot to mention the theme music and introduction, and how poor it was on Upstart Crow. It was like a pound shop Blackadder kind of thing that they did for that.
It did make me think of the Blackadder theme, but that the latter was by Howard Goodall, wasn't it? Whereas this one isn't.
Where I wanted to ask you, what were your impressions of the theme music for Count Arthur Strong.
I'm wondering whether you're teasing me to say it's reminiscent of a certain Tony Hancock.
Well, isn't it
being
just
a low-register brass instrument? A euphemism, I think it is.
it kind of it's that kind of that sort of. Did you obviously thought of that in the Hancock thing?
No, you've prompted me, and I saw. We should explain. We see each other via Skype. You had a cheeky glint in your eye, which said, "Don't do that." No, that's Joyce Grenfell. Don't do that, George. He just did an over cheeky look at me. It said to me, "Yes, Tony Hancock," but no, I hadn't thought of it before then.
Interesting. We'll hold that thought. We'll come back to that a little bit later on. Do you want to hear a clip so I can get your headline as to what you thought of it?
I've got to say yes, really, haven't I? I think that's what you call a rhetorical question.
I can't stand I wasn't going to, but I can't stand the tension anymore. So let's dive straight in and let you have a listen. If you've never heard Count Arthur Strong's radio show before, here's your chance to hear what it's all about. We find our hero, Count Arthur Strong, and this is very. There's lots of strands that kind of go through. There were 7 series of this, and there are lots of strands that go through all of the episodes in the 7 series. And one of them is he's very much in love with meat. I mean, he's so much so that he's got his own personal butcher, as it were. Well, that's how he sees him anyway. It's just the butcher on the high street, Wilf. But we catch up with our hero in the butcher shop, having a chat with Wilf.
I'm doing that radio play I was telling you about today for the BBC, or as we call it in the business, for a joke, the British Broadcasting Association. Copacaster. Oh, the British Bird Coping. The British Corpse Burning Commission. Assastication. Corpse Burning Assastication? No, that would be the BCBCACBA, wouldn't it? What's amusing about that? Anyway, if I can get a word in. I saw the producer of it the other day, remember?
What, him that tripped over?
Yes, well, that was nothing to do with me, so don't start all that up. You want to get your fingers right before you start pointing all the facts up.
Now, when I play the clips and I've chosen the show and I introduce them and you won't let me know until after the first clip what you make of it, your fizzog on Skype, we are the Skype cross lovers, as we learnt last week, as Upstart Crow was all Romeo and Juliet related, but you try to give nothing away visually.
Yeah.
And hence the listener, of course, is missing nothing either. In fact, they're better off than me having to look at you. But I might have wrong-footed you a bit because I was letting slip that I was enjoying it.
Yeah.
But do you want the headline then?
Yeah, go on, give me the headline. Can I just say, actually, you're right. I do. I can relax when it's not my turn, as it were, in the barrel.
Oh yeah. But I was not deliberately trying to disguise the fact I enjoyed some of the gags there.
Right.
But my headline would be Count Arthur Strong Performance, if you like that kind of thing.
Right.
I had another one which was Mr. Malaprop, and I was
Yeah.
trying to do something clever with that, but that's not really going anywhere. So if you like that kind of thing, well, I know you could say that about any show, but I think it might be particularly a bit of a Marmite show. But the funny thing is, I experienced the Marmite flip, as I'm now calling it, which is not a strange dance after you've had some toast with it on, but the feeling of, do you remember, can you think of a show recently, I really laughed out loud like a drain the first time I heard it, second time, quite a pronounced fall off of laughter.
Was it Herbert Clunkerdunk?
It was indeed.
Yeah. It just shows I've been paying attention, doesn't it? I should get points
amazing.
for that, really. I don't know what I'd do with them once I've
And
got them.
what do points mean? Oh, you don't know what you're going to do with them.
No.
Well, they mean prizes, surely.
I feel like I should have some, but anyway. Yeah, go on.
I worked on pets with win prizes, I'll have you know.
So did you have the reverse of that? Did you have a reverse Herbert Clunkerdunk?
No, I mean,
Which, of course, as we all know,
Herbert.
is also an ice skating move, isn't it?
Yes, it breaks the ice at parties.
He's always done a reverse Herbert Clunkerduck. What about that?
Imagine David Coleman being amazed by that. Whereas with Clunkerdunk, I was still enjoying it and thinking, I was just concentrating on different things second time through. And of course, people will know, regular listeners will know, anyone who enjoys comedy knows part of the appeal of comedy and the way of getting a laugh is it's the element of surprise, isn't it? And by definition, you can't have surprise twice in a row or not the same way. But I have to say, well, we'll get into it a bit later on, but I was enjoying it once again because it's the infectious thing of seeing you enjoy it. And then, but I found that there's not an awful lot below the surface for me to want to listen anymore. I love it when it's there. And look, anyone who knows me knows I love wordplay, puns, all of that. As a colleague at work said after a particularly awful lacy pun, I've quoted this before, I'm sure, so cover your ears, Shane. But he said, I bet when you were a kid, Adrian, your parents didn't give you toys to play with, they gave you the English language, which is certainly, well, it's a budget toy. And it's very true, actually. It's a good gag, but it's also very true.
But he didn't know they used to just hit you with books, which is not the same thing at all, is it really?
Oh, is it not? Okay.
I don't think so. Do you know what? I might surprise you here. I like wine. No, that's Alan Partridge. I might surprise you here.
I thought I'd heard that somewhere.
I get what you're saying, and a couple of things. The reason I chose something from series 1 was because, and in hindsight, actually, I mean, I obviously don't know the material as well as I thought I did because I thought I'd chosen a stronger one, being a little bit naughty there. But when you look at the whole 7 series, it does really kind of tail off towards series halfway through series 5, maybe series 6 and series 7. And the impression I get is that the material is spread too thin. Now, it's a weird thing to say because they didn't go, right, okay, Series 1, Episode 1, Count Arthur Strong radio show. Now, bear in mind, lads, we're going to write 7 series of this, 6 episodes, and don't forget the Christmas specials. They don't do it like that. But
no.
I still, as a body of work, and even in that episode, you're right, I can feel that the material being stretched, and there's really clever stuff in there. There was one of the episodes, I can't remember which one it was, but one of the episodes, he gets odour eaters and beta blockers confused. And he said, and at the end, he kind of sort of like, he's been doing this all through the episode, at the end he says, well, I can see why the snooker players use them, he said, because they really are comfortable. And he was at the time when snooker players were taking beta blockers to stay calm, and he thought they were putting odour eaters in the shoes. So there was this beautifully crafted wordplay and confusion and, as you say, malapropism and all this kind of stuff going on. Yeah. But very often it just resorts to the lowest common denominator. Now, that particular part there, I think we should tell people. Well, I don't. To me, that means something because I used to work with a guy who used to say the real thing because that is a thing, isn't it? The British Broadcasting Corporation, or as we call it, the British Broadcorping Castration.
Yes, which I heard from. We're back to Blue Peter, Simon Groom, albeit of course off air. That was the first and almost only time I've heard it. It's one of those gags that's fallen out of fashion, I think. But people were still enjoying it in the room, and I can't imagine 100% of them knew where the gag was based. So they're so enjoying being there and enjoying Arthur Strong. They're obviously lovers of the show. Yeah. And maybe a little tipsy. They're in a nice little comedy club on the South Coast.
Isn't it, in Brighton, yeah.
Yeah. We'll get to Company's House and all of that a bit later.
Sorry, go on.
Well, hold that thought. Have you held that?
I'll hold it. Yeah.
Give it a name. Relax. Breathe deeply. Put your shirt back on. You naughty boy. Moving on. I've now forgotten what I was going to say.
Well, you put your shirt back on then. If you're going to
well, I'm very shirty. I think what I was going to say was, yes, here's the thing. It's series 1, as you point out, series 1, it's only episode 3, and already it's almost as if they're expecting us to know the back plot of Count Arthur Strong, or they don't care. It's one of the two, isn't it? Because there's no reference to I'm a failed actor or I'm a sort of variety hall has-been. And I was really surprised in that, because that would give it depth. And this is where I think it would be different to Herbert Clunkerdunk, or very different shows. But
don't you think the intro does that, though? And I love that kind of thing. At the start, Steve Delaney says, "Welcome to Count Arthur Strong's radio show," doesn't he? And he sort of says, you know, what was it he said at the start? He said he'd twice worked with Jimmy Clitheroe once.
Yes, there was some nice guy. Also, he'd worked with people as diverse as the Archbishops of Canterbury. That sentence ends.
Yeah, so there is like a little kind of lead in there, which kind of...
That was all a bit odd, though, that opener. And some strange technical stuff going on, some unwanted acoustic resonances, but let's not dwell on those.
I can't help it. I'm old.
It was very odd. It didn't sound like it was in a proper studio. It sounded like it was done in his bathroom.
Right.
Maybe it was.
I don't know whether that was an afterthought, whether they put that on. They kind of like, maybe they thought, actually, like you did, that the leap into it all was all a bit too big. So let's put like some kind of explainer on the...
But it would have been... it would have been nice if it had grown organically out of the story.
Right. Again, that's got a thread to it as well, because like in some of the starts, it'll say that Count Arthur Strong was the best kept gherkin grower or whatever, and it's he always wins the prize 1968 to 1969. Whatever it is he's done,
he's a has-been.
That was his heyday. Yeah, 68 to 69, which I think is a really clever way of saying that was it, lads. That was the pinnacle. That was the peak.
It's been all downhill ever since.
Yeah.
One thing that surprised me actually was that he's more mature than I thought. I thought he was acting old, like a Clive Dunn, being is it Corporal Jones or Private Jones? He was a butcher, wasn't he?
Oh no, he's Corporal, isn't he? He's Corporal Jones, isn't
Corporal, he? Yeah, he was a butcher, lest we forget.
Yeah, yeah.
But that was all done with mirrors and makeup, and he's just a bit older than I thought he might be. 1954, I think he was born.
Right, okay. So he's what, 60 odd then, is he?
In his 60s, yeah.
I think he's now. I mean, when he started this, he was in his 50s, wasn't he, I think?
It was 10 years ago, yeah.
He has been doing this for a long time, and I think he's been doing it in clubs and stuff before, that kind of thing, as a sort of stand-up type situation. It was interesting as well, some of the gags throughout the episode, I felt, fell flat. I don't know if you picked up on that kind of thing. Do you see that, like, right at the start as well, when the butcher's saying to a customer, and he was, so much for this, so much for that, and 50p for your brains. And you could see they were you could hear they were waiting for a laugh, which never came. I don't know if you...
now you mentioned it, yes, I did pick up on that. I suppose I saw it in the context of what overwhelmingly seemed to be, as it were, the home audience, the home crowd cheering.
I thought they were quite tough. It just shows you, doesn't it? How I thought they were tough. I mean, it sounded to me like almost like do you know what it reminded me of? And this is a reference. You're going to have to Google this, kids, I'm afraid. And I'm not spelling it for you. The Wheel Tappers and Shunters Social Club, which I don't know if you remember from TV days in the 1970s.
Who could forget? Yes.
70s. And it was supposed to be this kind of social club setting, and it almost sounded like that kind of... I thought they were a really tough audience. But anyway.
Well, here's the thing.
Yeah.
Sorry, we should move on.
No, go on. It is the thing. Go on.
I was just going to say, when I've done sort of public speaking stuff and ambassadorial stuff for the BBC,
yes,
which is tougher, a small crowd or a larger crowd? It's actually the small crowd is tougher. If you get like a family, 4 or 5 people, it's much tougher than a crowd of... I mean, they were never huge crowds. This is only taking people from area to area, so it's only 25 people. But if you're hearing some toughness, I wonder if it's that. It's a small venue. You hear individual laughs, which I know is not your favourite thing on earth. And you don't get waves of laughter that you get with a larger crowd, where it just you just ride the waves as a performer.
Yeah. And it's also that thing you say, if the person next to you is falling all over the place laughing, that kind of becomes infectious as well, doesn't it? So there's fewer people for that to happen, I suppose. I just do wonder what's happened to the BBC if they have somebody like you as an ambassador. I think that kind of says it all, really. But there you are.
Confirms your worst fears.
If you're a small country, you wouldn't have you. Do you know what I mean? So why would you, as a small organisation?
I'll have you know, I'm the what is it? The ambassador to the Court of St James and the Cheese Board, president of the Cheese Board. Is that Les Patterson?
Anyway, clip number 2, and
yes.
As we've already kind of gathered from Count Arthur Strong's conversation with Wilf, that he is going to be appearing in a radio play. I mean, there was loads of stuff in between the two clips, which we can, if we get a chance, we'll go back to. That I thought kind of, worked. And again, we were saying about some of the people that he references. I mean, at one point, he mentions Lord Delfont, doesn't he? And he had a conversation about Lord
Bernie,
Delfont.
yeah.
And I said to him, Bernie, put your money away. It's no good in here. It's my tree.
Yeah, that does hint at a sort of hinterland, if you'll pardon the pun.
Yeah. But
and
anyway, sorry, I got sidetracked there. So, we know he's going to be appearing in a radio play. And the producer, Susanna, is not sort of really very enamoured with Count Arthur Strong. He's trying to ingratiate himself with the group because there's a young actor on his first job as well. And they all sit down eventually after he's distracted them and interrupted them and dragged the whole thing on. They sit down and start a read-through.
Can someone time this? Right. Simon and Judith are in the living room of their large house in the country. There is a tension, something unspoken between them. Simon looks out. What have you got your hand up for?
I want to say something to you, and I didn't want to interrupt you.
What is it?
Well, if what's between them is unspoken, it'll not make very good radio, will it?
But it's just a figure of speech, isn't it?
All I know is, if I was looking at the Radio 4 in the Radio Times, and it said they were putting on an unspoken play, it's a very remote possibility whether I'd bother tuning in or not. And I'm in it. So that's all I wanted to say. Make you aware of that, Sandra.
Susanna, we will word whatever we put in the Radio Times very carefully. Happy?
Just as well to clarify these things, isn't it? That's all I'm saying, Sandra. World wars have started from little misunderstandings, and look what that's led to.
Now, to save you from all the correspondence and the death threats on Twitter, well, I'm not sure I can totally save you from all of those. Your wife's clearly on your case, but that's tough. That's marriage.
They're mostly from Alexei Sayle these days, but go on, yeah.
And strangely from Leslie Crowther, which I thought was a defunct account, but who knew? Who knew? She was actually a director. The producer is John Herbert. So you're a bit of a Herbert.
Oh, was it? Oh, sorry. Okay. Oh, dear.
That's
oh, dear.
all right. That's all right.
You are taking this seriously, aren't you?
I am.
You do know it's only radio, don't you?
It's only a podcast. And we should also say, to be legally safe, we hope, it's a joint Comedia Entertainment and Smooth Operations production. You'll be so pleased with me, Shane. I went to the company's house this evening. Well, online, not literally, not to the physical bricks and mortar.
Yeah.
And there was a Smooth Operations down my way, funnily enough, a few years ago, which is now defunct. But I don't think that's anything to do with the radio production company.
Yeah, it's gone. It's actually it's now a company called.
Well, actually, no. There's more than one that's defunct. Yeah, but that's geographically. That I think that was an entirely different thing. But there was another one I looked at, which was based in London. It had the name of Nick Barraclough, amongst others. Now, do you know that name?
No.
The Radio 2 presenter. I'm not sure he's still with them, but it's clearly part of that sort of national radio set. He was, I think he did a country music
okay.
Presentation. Yeah, weekly show and all of that.
Right.
But I'm sure fingers in many pies. So, yeah, so Smooth Operations are no more, but Comedia's still there because that's tied to the venue, is it not, in Brighton?
Yeah, I was really surprised. I think it is, yeah. I was really surprised that I thought when you look up Commedia, that Mark Radcliffe would be in some way involved in that. But
That's what I was looking out for.
But
do we know?
Well, he's not a director, is he, of the company? He's not involved in that sense.
Could it be under a different name? I mean, I'd always assumed that was his real name, but
yeah, I guess I don't know. I mean, not really. Yeah, I thought that was his name because he was Mark Radcliffe when he wasn't on air, wasn't he? When he just worked at the BBC in the production capacity, which he did before he was on air.
I didn't know that. In which case, yes, that is a surprise because I know you've keenly followed Mark's career. And in fact, Count Arthur Strong emerged, well, amongst other things. I mean, the actress you mentioned, Steve Delaney, it was a creation of his around the time of him being at Central School of Speech and Drama, if I remember correctly.
Oh, okay.
And then he put it on the back burner for years, and someone encouraged him, because they'd moved up the food chain of comedy, and encouraged him to dust it off as an idea. And then it was first launched in terms of radio, before it was even a fully fledged half-hour Radio 4 show, such as we're slabbing now. It was, I think he did it kind of two ways, as it were. We call it in the trade, just sort of quasi-interview with Mark Radcliffe on his Radio 2 show. 10 years ago.
Right, I didn't know that. That's interesting. Yeah, so that's obviously where the germ of the idea came from. To maybe we can produce this into something else. I tell you, did you notice Graham Duff is involved in this as well?
I was quite sure you wouldn't miss that. Yeah. Now we have to remind ourselves he was on Ideal. Is that right?
Ideal, and also Hebben. He was actually one of the actors in Hebben, wasn't he? He was the photographer on the newspaper who didn't want to go out because it was raining.
And the writer thereof. Yes.
That's right. Yeah, right. He does a lot of writing and script editing. I think he wrote Ideal, didn't he? I think with was he on his own or with Johnny Vegas? I can't remember, but he was certainly involved with that. Big fan of his work. I'm a big fan of his work. And interestingly enough, as well, the actress, the actress who plays the director, as I stand corrected now. Joanna Neary was also in Ideal as well. She was.
Was she the pregnant one, perchance?
She was Cartoon Head's girlfriend.
Cartoon Head makes me laugh just to hear the term.
It's strange, Joanna, because I whenever I hear her or see her in anything, she always makes me wonder about the performance. She always sounds nervous, or I don't know what it is.
Really?
There's something about, and I always think, yeah. I mean, she played a very nervous character in Ideal anyway, like kind of sorry and kept apologising, that sort of thing. But yeah, so she's kind of that set as well. I think they kind of maybe they all went to to college or whatever it was together, and that's how they ended up. That's how they end up working together afterwards. But again, I mean, I know there's the kind of getting the name wrong and all that sort of stuff, and that's a bit hackneyed in and of itself, isn't it, really? Yeah. But, I mean, don't you just love that line where she'd said that she didn't want to be interrupted, and so he puts his hand up and she said, well, get your hand in because I want to say something, but I didn't want to interrupt you. So he kind of sees those two things as separate. I love the way that you see the workings of his brain all the while. Like, when he's talking about the British Broad Corp in Castamation and all that sort of stuff, he doesn't leave it at that. He says, no, hang on, because that would be the BCACB. And you can, do you know what I mean? You see the whole thought process. Did they get any marks for that? Because I love that. I think that's so clever, the way that they do that.
I hadn't thought well, it's a related thing. I was more taken by the fact he'll end up picking a fight with himself, and then he'll have a go at them because he'll say, well, don't come all of that. It reminds me, actually, saying it now, do you remember Ronnie in the chair? Ronnie Corbett, of course, at the end of the two Ronnies.
Yeah.
It's that... I mean, the running joke of Ronnie in the chair was the joke he was trying to tell that he kept interrupting himself wasn't a very good joke.
That's
but
right.
The digressions were funny. Spike Mullins is the writer. And there's one where he's... Is it... he's heading to a farmhouse. He's broken down. I'll summarise. He's broken down, dead of night, raining, sees a light in the distance, walks towards this farmhouse. But on the way, he's having this internal dialogue about, well, what if the person can't help me? What if they, they don't like a stranger knocking on their door on a dark night? By the time he gets to the door and they open the door, he says, well, you know what you can do with your spanner.
Yeah, I remember that one well. Yeah, it's seeing that thought process or that kind of thought process being laid out in front of you. I always kind of admire that because I think that takes a great deal of thought to write that down. I tell you who else he reminds me of when he's doing the arguing, and like you're absolutely right. He's kind of picking a fight with him, and it's almost like everybody's sort of standing and watching until he resolves whatever this issue is in his head. There's a bit. It's like a verbal version of Jack Douglas, who I think appeared in one of the Carry On films. Remember him? And he used to go in all like. You know,
yes, it's got the tics. And,
yeah. There's a bit of that in there.
He's kind of holds his fists up as if in mock fight.
There's somebody there, kind of thing, annoying him. So there's that sort of stuff. Now,
what a mad character.
The really weird thing is that I mentioned the music right at the start, and I've been racking my brains for the last 4 or 5 days, trying to think of another comedy act who had just one character. And that's all they played throughout their career was they just did it. And there was only 2 people. Now, that might be just because I've not got a very good imagination. But the first one that sprung to mind was Hancock.
I was just wondering if we were back there. Funny enough, what's strange about that is they have the same name. But a bit like Al Murray, I suppose we could throw in, because Al Murray is his real name and Al Murray is the character.
Yeah.
I mean that's something to take to your therapist, isn't it?
Isn't the pub landlord is the character, isn't it? Is it?
Or Al Murray pub landlord.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, he's still under that name.
He uses his own name, yeah.
Yeah, but the trouble with that is they can end up sort of possessing the original actor, I think.
Yeah. Well, that's what happened with Tony Hancock, wasn't it? He hated the. He destroyed everything around him, didn't he? Until there was nothing left apart from Hancock, and then he destroyed that.
Yeah. And also, he thought he could write better than Galton and Simpson, which is quite a task.
Well, he thought he was a better sideman than Sid James. He thought he was a better character actor than Kenneth Williams, a better writer than Galton and Sid. You're right. I mean, but there's you can't do it all, can you? That's the whole. No. The whole point of it is that's what you just kill what people loved. Anyway, sorry, final. I just for no other reason, I think there are real parallels between. Now, I don't know whether they're deliberate parallels, but there's real parallels between Hancock and what Steve Delaney's created. I think. I don't know whether it means anything. I don't know if it gets us any further forward. I just simply plop it out.
I don't really want to dwell on that. And I do wish you hadn't provided a visual accompaniment to that for me.
I'll put my shirt back on.
This is, yes, please do.
Again. Final clip then. They're still in their meeting. They're still in their production meeting. They're still trying to get a read through, I think, is what they're originally trying to do. And after Count Arthur, I love the way that he did this as well. He kind of tricks them into, so we say it must be dinner time now. We've all got to go off and have lunch. And he says to the young guy who's never been in a production before, he said, come on, let me show you what an actor does with his dinner time. Which because there's only one thing, isn't there? Anyway, they go off and go to the pub and have a bout on the karaoke and have more than a few rounds of hospitality, and they come back after a long lunch and they try and carry on with rehearsals.
We're behind now because of you, Philip. Terribly behind. Have you any idea of the pressure that puts Sandra under?
Oh, I'll scream in a minute. Please don't call me Sandra again.
What would you like me to call you?
Susanna. Please call me Susanna.
Will that just not complicate things at this stage?
No!
Very well then, Susanna.
Right. Time this, please. Simon and Judith are in the living room of a large house in the country. There is a tension, something unspoken between them. Simon looks out of the window and speaks.
Do you know you can see for miles from...
Do you know you can...
What the bloody hell's going on? What do you think you're doing?
Well, what do you think you're doing?
I'm reading my part out.
What do you mean your part? I'm playing Simon.
Excuse me, but you are not. I've been engaged to undertake the role of Simon.
Well, that's ludicrous. For one thing, he's only supposed to be 19.
I've got news for you, nitwit. It's radio, is this? What they don't see, they don't know. For a kick-off, they've had 10 different Jack Woolies in the Archers since it started. And they've currently got 2 different Linda Snells as well, who do alternative scenes. And there's been at least 3 different Sue Lawleys in Desert Island Discs, to my knowledge.
I think he then goes on to spell that out, saying 2 men and a woman, or two women and a man, just to make it clear what a contradiction that is.
Oh, dear.
Obviously, it helps to be acquainted with British radio. But there was a disappointment, and I've only really recalled it coming back to these clips, which is they could have gone so much further with a radio play, I think. It got hung up on the gags. The gags became a slave to, or maybe the plot became a slave to the gags.
Yeah.
And you could have had all this panoply of, the marvellous theatre of the mind kind of stuff, at the risk of sounding, as I always do, horribly pretentious. But, there's so much you could do with that. And a bit more than just coconut shells for horses' hooves.
I think you're right. I think the other thing is as well, I think there is too much of the same kind of thing. Although I will say, in their defence, that again and again, when I listen to it, I think it is so much more than it first appears. And I'll give you an example. There's that lovely line in there where he says, well, what do you want me to call you then? She said, call me Susanna. And it's just that kind of, you have an understanding. He's got a real belief that what he is doing there's nothing wrong with it, and he's acting perfectly normally. Won't it just complicate things at this stage?
Yeah.
Because he believes that then he wants
she
her
is
to
Sandra.
call, yeah, he wants her to call her.
So why
Sandra.
would he change
you
to
do
another
that?
name?
And I think because you see that glimpse from time to time behind the curtain, as it were, into the mind of Count Arthur Strong, I think it makes it so much more than just the bumbling bloke getting the name wrong. I do agree, and I think you're right. I think that they could do less of that, because there is obviously an ability to do very clever writing, and they could do more of the clever writing rather than the easier stuff to do. Do you think that's possibly what it was? Is that once you get on a roll with that, and because it's such a well-defined character, it's easy to write that kind of stuff. I mean, he's writing his own stuff, and he's the character. So it's very difficult for you to come outside of the confines of that, isn't it, I guess?
Yeah. Or maybe it's just too easy to write malapropisms rather than to really agonise over subtext and all of that. And maybe I shouldn't agonise over it. I don't know. I mean, people want to be entertained, and, they have hard lives, hard working lives. You switch on the radio, you don't want to give your brain another brain ache when you've had one all day. But it did make me think it's another reason not to go back to it again,
right.
or flip it the other way around. There aren't enough reasons to go back, because I know I'll always love the wordplay and the puns and all of that, but there'll be something missing. Whereas I think Herbert Clunkerdunk, it is a very different thing, and of course it's TV against radio, but there's more going on. There's more you would see and hear, I think, each time.
But, I mean, the other thing with Herbert Clunkerdunk, it's hugely visual, isn't it? I mean, if you've not seen it, folks, please go and have a look, because it's out there, it's online. It is just amazing. It's like nothing else you'd have ever seen. I still haven't seen anything that I could draw a parallel to. No. The other thing with Count Arthur Strong that I think is worthy of note is that after the 7 radio series, they then went and made 3 TV series. And to prove your point, I think quite spectacularly prove your point, the characterisation was changed, and they toned down a lot of the stuff that you're talking about, and cranked up a lot of the plot points, other characters, different characters, more defined, and kind of cured what you're talking about. So I think that kind of really says it all, doesn't it? That obviously somebody thought the same as you did.
Well, except it turns out, of course, as ever, I'm malcontent, because I only watched one of the TV ones and thought, that's so different. They've thrown away all the good things in radio. So I'm a mass of contradictions. I wonder how I would come back to the TV version now. I just found, I'm well aware I'm virtually 100% contradicting what I've just said previously, but I found with the TV series, we're into bleak expectations kind of territory for me,
Right.
where it didn't transfer well. And also what I call the Paul Merton effect, where in yonks ago, when he was just building a national name for himself, I saw him in the Comedy Store as a live act, and then I saw him much more processed on TV. Channel 4 couldn't, in those days, I mean, this is why I think we have a healthier scene now. You can have a stand-up on TV and they don't have to do any, frolics and extra flub dubs around that.
Yeah.
But in those days, when Paul Merton was first on Channel 4, you'll recall, because we've revisited this, he was in a newsagent's.
Yeah, and
it was model of a shark or something on the roof or something weird.
It was like a newsagent's booth, wasn't it, out in the street kind of thing, like it was in the studio, but it's supposed to be out in the street, yeah. Yeah, and he was like that was kind of, because he was a big fan. We still is a big fan of Hancock, isn't he? In fact, he remade,
massive one, isn't he? Yeah.
Remade some of the Hancock stuff, but which I had a row with him about once. But because I just said to him, I said, look, with the greatest respect, I love your work, but why do it? I don't understand why you'd want to redo. It's like, look at this. I've done a sketch of the Mona Lisa. What do you think? What do you mean? What do I think? You've done it in crayon. What? I don't. Why would you? Do you know what I mean? And he was quite offended by it, I think, which I didn't mean. It was on a radio show. I didn't mean to. It wasn't. I wasn't trying to be controversial. I'd really be, as a big fan of Hancock, like he was. I kind of felt. I just thought it was a bit odd, really, to do. Anyway, but that's so. But yeah, and he kind of like talked to the camera, didn't he? It was he was talking to the audience, breaking the fourth wall kind of thing. I don't remember whether it was any good, curiously. I don't know.
No, I can't remember a single gag from it, although he might have. Actually, no, I think he used some of the gags that I saw him use live. Anyway, we won't go down that route.
No.
We must wrap up fairly soon, but how much do you think the gear change in TV that you've described, that it turns out that I'm not even satisfied with, even though it apparently does the things I'm whinging about, with the radio show, how much would you lay at the door of a different writer who we know, people will know as fans of Father Ted, Graham Linehan, co-wrote with Steve Delaney the 3 series, I believe all of the series of Count Arthur Strong on the telly. Do you think that was the major change?
I don't think so. I think it came from probably people on the 5th floor. It's that kind of directive, and I think Linehan knows how to work within those constraints. I think that's the difference, whereas maybe Steve Delaney didn't. I don't know. Again, I mean, Linehan, I'm a massive fan of his work. Most of the things that he writes, I can't really think of many exceptions, and I'm thinking of things like the IT Crowd, and as you mentioned, Father Ted. They did Partridge. A very funny, very talented writer. So. And to me, I kind of got the impression, I felt, because you can, rightly or wrongly, you think you can see where certain writers have written. Do you get that, where you think, oh, that's a Linehan thing there, because I've heard it in something else kind of thing, or a similar kind of thing in something else. And I kind of got the impression that he saved it, because I kind of liked the TV series, although it was a different animal. I was fully prepared to, think, oh, I don't like this. But then having watched it, I liked it. So I think it was as Ron and Ron would say, management. It was a kind of a management. That's the impression I got, is that you've got to make it more diverse. So set it in a Turkish cafe or whatever it was. It's that kind of stupid stuff, I think personally. But there you go. Yeah.
Well, I mean, they do say TV is radio with a gimmick, and
I've never heard of that before. I like that.
Yeah, that's what they said to me when I was in TV, funnily enough, working in TV. But sometimes it's a bit too gimmicky for its own good. Anyway,
what did you think though about Linehan? Did you think?
I don't know that I should comment. What I was thinking is I should go back to the TV series. I don't think it would be fair on him or anyone else working on the TV show for me to try and recall seeing one episode when it came out. I do remember the disappointment and thinking, well, yes, you can. obviously, it's because of that gimmick, the visual element. You can't just have wordplay on TV, whereas radio can get away with it. But in saying that, of course, I am contradicting myself because I'm saying I want more than wordplay out of the radio series. I want back plot. I want a bit something under the bonnet going on, a bit more substantial. And I just didn't feel it was there. But loads of lovely things there. Shall I give my score? Or do you want to go?
Yeah. No, I just wanted to say the TV series. Anyone who writes in a character called Eggy, I think gets my vote. I think that's just brilliant. Yeah, go on. Let's have the scores on the doors, please, Miss Ford.
Thank goodness Eggy wasn't on Smell-O-Vision, is all I can say. I'm going to give it 3 out of 5.
Right.
Very good. Just 3 is a kind of code from me that it just hasn't got that extra 10% or whatever, just to take it to something a bit more transcendent and something I'm more liable to sit down and watch. I have watched 2 or 3 series all the way through that we have slabbed. I know I'm famous for not being what did you call it, a serialist.
You're not a serialist, are you? You're a, what did I call you?
A unionist. Was it just one? I'd watch one show of a series and that would do it. Anyway, let me tell you very quickly the exceptions. Back to Life, watched all episodes, had to find out what happened, so that was a real driver there with Daisy.
Don't tell me because I haven't watched it. Yeah, go on.
Oh, well, you must. Gosh, get on it straight away. Herbert Clunkerdunk, somewhat inevitably. Of course, there's a pilot as well.
Yeah, I'll watch that.
And something else I can't remember, so that'll have to wait for another week. Anyway, let's hear your scores on the doors, Miss Ford's.
I very briefly, I would give it a 4, and because of that, I think the reason I give it a 4 is if I was cast away on a desert island and I was talking to Sue Lawley or one of the other 2 Sue Lawleys that they've had.
Even a male Sue.
The 2 blokes or a woman.
A boy called Sue.
Yeah, it would be my companion. I think I listen to it over and over again, and whenever I'm at a low moment, I can whack on a bit of Count Arthur Strong and it will always brighten my day, because even though it's a bit like the reverse of the Bee Gees, I think.
What, the GBs?
No. Well, I always say with the Bee Gees, if you wrote it down and said, right, it's 3 middle-aged blokes with beards singing in falsetto, we're going to take the charts by storm, you'd go, I don't think so.
Yeah.
And I think this is kind of the reverse of that, is that you kind of think, oh, all the things that it shouldn't be good, and yet it still is. And for that, I'd give it a 4. So what's that? 7 out of 10 for Count Arthur Strong's radio show.
It was a strong showing. Yeah,
we've left a link to. You can't actually hit. It's got, annoyingly, the BBC website, because they haven't paid or whatever. It's got all these episodes, and it lets you click on them.
You can't click on them.
It lets you click on them individually. I spent 4 hours clicking on them all just to see that they were all unavailable. Thanks for that. But you can buy the first series, which we were reviewing from, on Amazon. You can get it on CD. Now, time for you to look at that pointy finger. Time for you. I'm going to put my shirt back on in a minute. Time for you.
Yos. That reminds me of Kitchener. Your slab needs you. Yeah.
Time for you to tell us what's on
set the homework.
Next
Can
week,
I just a very quick footnote, which is Mark Radcliffe is co-producer of that show we just slabbed.
Yes.
By the by. Right, now this is a random one with a slightly less random link. I was speaking to a colleague at work today, and how did we get onto it? She mentioned Friday Night Dinner.
Okay. It's just got a new series coming out, hasn't it? Or,
has it indeed?
Yeah.
Right. And once I'd worked out, because there's 2 shows I always confuse. There's one with Simon Amstell.
Grandma's House.
And Friday Night Dinner. So first I had to think, oh, right, is that the one with Tamsin Greig as the mother, right? And that's the miscreant boys who are supposed to be great. Anyway.
You just reminded me, sorry, somebody tweeted the other day, they said, Halloween, they said somebody came to my door as Gloria Gaynor. At first I was afraid. I was petrified.
Yeah, but They will survive.
Yes, I'm sure they will. Yeah, sorry, go on anyway. So you got confused between Grandma's house and Friday night dinner.
Yeah, once I'd worked out which they were talking about, of course, I evangelised to the world about the slab. You'll be pleased to know. I am that ambassador that you don't think I should be for the bee, but I am for the slab.
For anyone. Go on.
Well, too bad, mate. You're implicated. So I said to her, "Oh, you might be interested to know," or some other. I sounded like a continuity announcer for a moment. And you may like to know. So I pointed her in that direction. She came back with, "Oh, if you like that, you will like Man Down with Greg Davis." Oh. And I said, "What's that?" Never. Well, I have heard of it. But I'm not a Greg Davis fan, but only from the point of view that I've not even taken a tiptoe in his direction, really. All I know is he's very tall and he pops up on the odd panel show on Dave.
Well, he runs one, doesn't he? Doesn't he run that one where the...
Argumental?
What's it, Master? Challenge Master? Taskmaster, yeah.
Yeah.
I like the name of his live tour. His first live tour that when he became famous was The Back of My Mum's Head. And he had a picture of the back of his mum's head on the posters, which I quite like. That's a good way of doing it on the cheap, isn't it, really? To save on the photography. So, yeah.
Didn't have to pay for an expensive leggy model.
No.
Right, anyway, so I'm not dissing him. I'm just saying it's as much homework for me because it's one of those lucky dip things. And we'll see what we make of it. You'll find it on the Channel 4 app. And guess what? I'm going to go for the safe option. Series 1, Episode 1.
Okay.
You've got to have a system, and we're going in at the ground floor.
Love it. Okay, nice one. Interesting comment, which we'll explore next week. That if you like, what was she saying? If you like Grandma's house,
if you like Friday night dinner, now you're getting confused.
If you like Friday night dinner, you'll like Man Down, which I think is okay. All right,
hold that thought. Questionable.
We'll explore that one next week. That's the phrase I'm going to have in my mind as we watch the episode.
It looks to me that you can't imagine two more different shows, but hey, we'll explore that next week.
Okay.
He's denying it, folks, visually.
But
I'm not convinced. You're no actor.
I've just got a naturally shaky head. I can't help it.
It's the nerves.
Yes. Anyway, in the meantime, if you want to go and have a peruse of the back catalogues, or if you're thinking, how can I get this wonderful podcast in some more succinct and favourable for me way for me more favourable.
All the right words, not necessarily.
This is my Count Arthur Strong moment now, isn't it?
It is.
If you want to have a listen, you can catch us on Stitcher, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, Spotify, all these off the top of my head. But then when you haven't got any hair, you get room to write stuff on. And Apple Podcasts, and also there's a kind of semi-visual kind of thing with the little splodges going on in the background on YouTube as well.
That's no way to refer to your children in the back of shop.
Little splodges going on in the background.
Yes, I suppose I'm doing anti-social media, which is to say we are at Comedy Slab on Twitter, and also our Facebook page is similarly at Comedy Slab. We'd love it if you liked the latter and followed us on the former, and then you get a chance to see Leslie Crowther with a shaved head and a too small a suit talking communism in the middle of the street and depping for Alexei Sayle, who apparently isn't funny and is always at Shane's door. And also, if you could see your way clear to recommending us to friends and family and all of that jazz, we'd be very grateful. Oh, yes. And yes, enjoy the back catalogue, as Shane says.
Yes, and so from me until next time, I'm going to go away. I'm going to take my T-shirt off for a change, and I'm going to stuff it through the letterbox. And if that doesn't stop Alexei Sayle, then nothing will.
And probably kill his dog as well, the odours therein. And yes, what was I going to say? I've had a Count Arthur Strong moment. Not only can I not pronounce his name, but I can't remember what I was going to say. So that seems strangely appropriate, doesn't it, really? It's been a long day. But yes, we will sash it. Oh, yes, I'm going into a Turkish cafe. I'm going to wear a pork pie hat or eat a pork pie in a Turkish cafe, one of the two.